So, as most of you probably know, I like to read FNaF Fright stories that I haven't read yet and see if I could find any interesting details that many people may have missed on their first time reading. A bit of a recent addition to the series is that if I find enough interesting details connecting to one specific topic, I use those to create a theory of my own. In the past, we've talked about how the fourth closet graphic novel is inconsistent with the original book, how Step Closer might connect to the lore of Security Breach, how Dance With Me may be teasing the return of Mrs. Afton in Security Breach, and how Find Player 2 may be telling us that the FNaF 4 Freddy bully could be one of the missing children or another victim in the series. And in this video, we're going to be reading Out of Stock, a fan favorite story, but one that I haven't read, or at least not until now. But before we get into Out of Stock, I'd just like to mention that after Out of Stock in this video, the next video in this series will be slightly different. Instead of reading a story that I haven't read yet, I'm going to be rereading a story that I already have read, and that video will be about Friendly Face. But after that, I am going to be going back to the stories that I haven't read yet, and the video after Friendly Face will be 1:35 AM. But anyways, Out of Stock, let's get into it. Number 1. Right at the start of the story, it's revealed that Oscar's dad is dead, and this started me thinking Oscar could be a parallel to Michael Afton. See, as we talked about in a previous video, the player of FNaF 4 is Michael Afton, meaning Michael Afton is the one to face off against Plushtrap. The bite victim also probably did, but what we play in FNaF 4 is from Michael's perspective. So Oscar would likely be a representation of Michael, and his mom would be the representation of William. Though Oscar and his mom have a good relationship, there's something later on that connects Oscar's mom to William, and the dad who died represents the Afton mother, which is kinda weird. The mother and the father kinda switch spots, but it's still what happens. Number 2. Mr. Devereaux tells Oscar to get his toy even if he doesn't know if he can. Later on, Oscar does go get the toy, but does a bad thing in the process, and later on this ends up biting him in the ass. So I started wondering, what if this is meant to represent Michael and what he did to the bite victim? He saw an opportunity to get revenge on the bite victim and took it, and later on, it bit him in the ass, in the form of the FNaF 4 nightmares. But not only that, the reason for Oscar doing what he did also connects to the bite victim. Number 3. Oscar steals the Plushtrap Chaser for two main reasons. One, there's been many events in his life where he has almost done something or almost gotten what he wanted, but he's just fallen short. A big example of this, and the important one, is that when he almost had a full and great family, his dad died, mirroring Mike's mom dying. And second, Oscar is jealous of his friends because they are most likely going to get the Plushtrap Chaser, and Oscar isn't. This mirrors Mike being jealous of the bite victim, albeit for a very different reason, but it's still worth calling out. Number 4. Some stuff mentioned in this story quite randomly are the details about the Emporium. The Emporium had been nearly closed 3 separate times on the brink of bankruptcy, but was always bought out by someone who couldn't stand to see it get shut down. The place was also never cleaned, and this could very well be a reference to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, as it has been closed no less than 3 times, but it always somehow manages to reopen. The fact that the Emporium is always on the brink of bankruptcy could be a reference to the FNaF 1 newspaper saying the restaurant has struggled to stay in business, and it could also be a reference to the bankruptcy ending from FNaF 6, and the fact that the Emporium has never been cleaned very much matches up with the FNaF 1 building. Number 5. When at the mall, Raj and Isaac tell Oscar where they went before the mall to try and find the Plushtrap Chaser. Quote, "Dude, we tried the Toy Box Marbles in that place on 23rd and San Juan," said Raj, skipping right to the point. "We even went to that weird organic place on 5th Street that only sells wooden toys," said Isaac. End quote. With every Fazbear Frights book being released by now, besides Felix the Shark, when I read this, my immediate thought was Puppet Carver. In the Puppet Carver machine uses wood to create fully wooden and working animatronics. If I recall correctly, the Puppet Carver is one of the stories that has nothing suggesting what time period it takes place in. So it's entirely possible that the Puppet Carver took place sometime in the 90s, or maybe even the 80s, but more likely like 90s, and Out of Stock seems to take place in modern times, given that it's mentioned that the internet is a thing and it's common for kids to have cell phones, and also that Raj has a gaming console. So it's entirely possible that after the events of the Puppet Carver, Porter left the pizza playground and created a business of his own making wooden animatronics as well as toys. I don't know why, but this detail made me think of that one scene in It Chapter 2 when Stephen King makes fun of his own character for having a stutter. I don't know, it just reminded me of that, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, I want to see about the baseball card, bowling ball, f***ing bike.
Number 6. The secretary from Oscar's school tries to buy 5 Plushtrap Chasers for her nephews and complains about the rule being only one plush trap chaser per person, but she got one anyway. It was the first time Oscar had actually seen a plush trap chaser, quote unquote, in the flesh. A theory I had when the In the Flesh story came out was that the fetus trap could have been the plush trap chaser from this book. It would make a certain amount of sense considering the plush trap chaser has human eyeballs and teeth, and fetus trap was stated to look more organic than the VR game Springtrap. This theory seemed to have been disproven though by the fact that Eleanor is responsible for the plush trap chaser, but is it really? I think it is, because if I recall correctly, Eleanor was the one who actually put the human eyes and teeth in the plush trap chaser, so I don't think this could be true, but it's just something I thought was worth mentioning. Number 7. When running from security, Oscar and his friends had to run through a parking lot swerving a bunch of cars and minivans. It's stated that Oscar feels like he's playing a human arcade game. This could be a reference to Midnight Motorist, an arcade minigame in FNaF 6 where you have to continuously dodge cars. And this also ties into our next detail, number 8. The mention of Oscar feeling like he's in a human arcade game also seems mighty suspicious if you consider that in Security Breach, there's a Plush Trap Chaser arcade game in the mall, which is also interesting if you consider that Oscar is being chased out of the mall. Number 9. Speaking of the Security Breach arcade, it's also worth mentioning that there's a Fetch arcade, an arcade with Ralpho from Bunny Call, and there's an arcade with Theodore and Ella. My friend Spencer believes that this could imply the Fazbear Fright stories and possibly the novel trilogy are actually arcades in the game universe, which would make some sense until you realize that there's mentions of William Afton being a murderer, spirits possessing animatronics, human robots, and a bunch of other stuff in these books. And William being a murderer just shouldn't be mentioned here because William is publicly known as a famous man, which is told to us by FNAF AR's FazFacts. So the theory known as arcade frights just doesn't work. But it still is interesting that we have these Fazbear Fright stories in the form of arcades, as well as a snack space from Into the Pit and room for one more. One last thing to mention about the Plush Trap Chaser arcade, I think now is a good time to mention that the Plush Trap Chaser in the games and the books are different. The Plush Trap Chaser in the games really is just regular plush trap as we see on the arcade. The cover for the first Fazbear Frights graphic novel was originally this, and this just shows the Plush Trap Chaser as just regular plush trap. With this being inaccurate to how he's described in the book, the cover was changed to this. This was a very different design compared to the Chaser in the game universe. So these next few details I think everyone knows about by now, but it's still very interesting and I have some ideas on the reasoning behind them, especially number 11. This one's really interesting. Number 11. The Plush Trap Chaser has a speaker, which is interesting because the only animatronics to have speakers are Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy. It's also stated that the Plush Trap Chaser isn't meant to be able to talk, so why does this one have a speaker? Well, since it shouldn't be able to talk, I think it's safe to say that this is the only one with a speaker. So I thought for a few minutes, and after a while, the answer dawned on me. In the Fourth Closet, and more importantly the Fourth Closet graphic novel, the speaker on Funtime Freddy is what William injects the remnant into. Now, I haven't read the final epilogue yet, but I'm pretty sure the Plush Trap Chaser has remnant, and since this Plush Trap Chaser is made by Eleanor, it's possible this speaker was used partially to inject the Chaser with remnant. But again, I haven't read the final epilogue yet, so I could be completely wrong. But I did ask my friends, and they said that it's never truly specified what the Plush Trap Chaser is, so I think it's entirely possible that he does have remnant, since it's not told to us whether he does or doesn't. Number 12. Something else about the Plush Trap Chaser that also ties into the speaker is the fact that he has the ability to mimic voices. This is extremely weird when you consider that the only animatronic in the entire series who can mimic voices is Funtime Freddy. See, that's the second connection the Chaser has to Funtime Freddy, so why is that? I honestly have no clue, but I feel like it's not a coincidence. I feel like there's something else here that we haven't picked up on, but what that is, I really don't know. Number 13. I think everyone knows this by now, but the Plush Trap Chaser works pretty much the same way as Plush Trap does in FNAF 4. Moves around in the dark, freezes in the light. I just wanted to mention that because why does the Chaser have the same function as Plush Trap, but specks of Funtime Freddy? Number 14. It's stated that Oscar and his mom look very much alike, which could further the connection between Oscar and his mom to Mike and William, since Mike and Sister Location says the animatronics thought Mike was William, meaning they look alike. Number 15. There's been some complaints about the new cover of the Fazbear Frights graphic novel, namely the fact that parts of the title are hard to see because of the Chaser's ear and claws. But another complaint is that the Chaser's teeth are a lot less human looking and are really just sharp teeth like the Nightmares have. But this actually is kind of accurate. See, the cover is the scene of Plush Trap chewing through the door, and in that scene and out of stock, it's said that Chaser's teeth get sharper as it works its way through the door. Like, think of how you sharpen a pencil. So, technically that cover is pretty accurate. And those are all the individual details I found in Out of Stock. So now, let's talk about the theory that this story sparks. Something I thought about before actually reading the story was the fact that the Chaser has human eyeballs and teeth, something we all know. But not only that, the plush-trap Chaser also has gums that bleed. And this makes sense with the teeth, but what doesn't make sense is that they're not connected to a human body, but they still somehow manage to bleed, despite seeming to have no blood to even produce. So what is this trying to tell us? Well, I think it's trying to reference Springtrap. Think about it, Springtrap has a dead body inside him, including human eyes and probably teeth too. Looking inside the model for Springtrap's head reveals that his animatronic eyes are literally stuck on top of his human eyeballs. With Plushtrap in this story, a character with some resemblance to Springtrap, having human eyeballs, it seems to be telling us that Plushtrap is a nightmare version of Springtrap, which would place the gameplay of FNaF 4 after FNaF 3. I don't really believe this, to be honest, but I do think it's possible. One thing it would explain is the line from FNaF 4's trailer that says, "What have you brought home?" We know from the FNaF 4 files that Shadow Freddy is at least partially responsible for the FNaF 4 nightmares, and him appearing as an Easter egg in FNaF 3 could mean one of two things. One, he could be attached to Mike, still following him around until the curse is broken, or two, he could have attached to Mike after FNaF 3. I still believe that the FNaF 4 gameplay is before FNaF 3, but I think Out of Stock does make it more possible that it is actually after FNaF 3. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me, or do you think FNaF 4's gameplay takes place at some other point in the timeline? And if I see any comments saying it's 1983, I swear to God. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!